welcome to the second period and for the growth of the game from MacEwan University. Hope you enjoyed the first period and that first intermission. I think the score is 4-0 for diversity and inclusion against racism, because we had four speakers so far, and so the score will continue to rise for D&I. And so in this second period, this is our first hot stove of the day, community experiences of racial discrimination in hockey, and we're wanting to hear about these experiences. And today we have with us Devin Buffalo from the Indigenous Sport Council of Alberta. And Devin is from Samson Cree Nation, incredible achievements in college hockey, and he's spent a lot of time volunteering and working with various Indigenous sporting organizations within Canada, and also traveling across Canada to speak to youth. We also have with us Lalli Tur, who is he's a lifelong hockey player. Let's start off with that. And he's the creator of Aparna Hockey, the first South Asian-based hockey network. And you may have seen earlier this year, Aparna Hockey is the most recent recipient of the NHL's Willie O'Ree Community Hero Award. And we also have Keely Brown from the Oilers Entertainment Group. She's a lifelong ringette hockey player as well. An incredible amount of medals in ringette, and earning amazing accolades along the way. She's already inducted into the Alberta Sports Hall of Fame, the one that we all drive by here on the QE2 when we're driving through Red Deer. Now a successful lawyer who leads the Oilers Entertainment Group's legal department. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. We really want to draw into the personal experiences in this hot stove. So I'm going to start off with you, Devin. Can you tell us about a time when you witnessed or experienced racial discrimination in a hockey setting?
Yeah, for sure. I just want to say thank you for welcoming me to this discussion, and there's a lot of great speakers, so I'm honored. I think being an Indigenous player, I'm from Maskwacis, played my minor hockey in Wetaskiwin, so growing up in the rural minor hockey system, kind of sheltered away from the city, but more susceptible to the interactions between Indigenous and non-Indigenous. So I think throughout my career, I believe like racism was occurring. You're too young to understand that really. So, your parents see it more, but you don't understand it. But I think the very first time I had a head-to-head kind of battle with racism was when I was playing midget hockey. Finally cracked a AAA team, which was so hard to crack. Now we're seeing more Indigenous players, making AAA teams. But, 10 years ago, you saw one or two in the whole league. So I remember in playoffs, it was during warm-ups, and I'm a goalie, so I'm at the blue line stretching. And there's this a guy from the other team, and he comes to the red line, trying to talk to me. And I thought he was a friend, right? I thought he knew me somewhere or something, that he was just wanting to chat. So I go up, take off my mask, and he looks at me, and he looks me in the eyes, and he says, he mumbled something, and I couldn't really understand. So I was like, "What's that?" With a smile on my face. And he said, "You're just another effing, Indian," and he swore. And I was like so confused, and that was the first time I ever experienced it, right? So I took a step back. I didn't know whether I should be mad, sad, angry, should I go fight him? Should I, so I didn't know how to respond. And I really, that feeling of helplessness and that attack. And there was another Indigenous player on my team, and I, told him and see how he would respond. And he lost it and went after him. And there was a big line brawl, and, it was very messy. And I think at that moment I decided that I would handle racism in a different manner and be more and try to understand what that meant, right? You're just another Indian is what he said. And so what does that mean? And that's when I was probably 15 or 16, and I wanted to really understand the roots of that meaning. Like, what is just another Indian to some people in Alberta? And learning the stereotypes of being, a lot of times we're looked at as like being lazy, not having respect to authority. There's a lot of stereotypes that we battle when we're on the ice, and we should just be worrying about, stopping the puck, not all these other aspects around you. And they do affect you for sure. So that's when I decided, like, the next time I heard, you're just another Indian, it would be in a manner of like respect, right? Like, oh, you're Indigenous. That's so cool. That, you're so strong and resilient. And that's kind of what I set out to do when, to go get a scholarship to the States, go to an Ivy League school, play professional hockey, and now come back and help the next wave of Indigenous athletes, and to really help them through that transition of that first time they're going to, deal with racism in their life, that first, cut, that first heartbreak, that when you realize this game isn't, designed for us, it's designed for other people. And, you're going to feel that you're just the only Indigenous person on the team, or other minorities. So I think that's important, is, for me to come back and with ISCA make that transition, or help them in that realization, right, that they're different and how to handle that, because it is a lot.
It's amazing to see how it impacted you and how you were able to use that as motivation to help others. Ladli, can you tell us about some of the moments that stick out for you when you witnessed or experienced racial discrimination in a hockey setting?
Yeah, so I grew up playing AAA hockey here in Edmonton. For the most part, I was always the only South Asian player or skin color, brown hockey player that played in the leagues here. And it got lonely, Ryan, right? Like, I mean, I have so many friends from hockey, but it's the mental battle that you go through as a kid, knowing that you're the only one. And the fact that kids are calling you different names, whether it be Paki or terrorist. On top of that, the worst part was when it was systemic racism, from my own coaches, from parents from my own team, right? That's where it hurt me a lot, because I didn't look like them, right? And I remember I was training, I think it was for midget AAA, and I'm working my tail off to, try to crack a junior A team. I'm working out at a facility over the summer where Jerome McGinley trained, and to basically be one of the last cuts for junior A and then come back to my midget AAA team where I have coaches that I have dealt in the past, right? And they cut me again and I go to midget AA. It hurts, right? You put so much time and effort into, the game that you love, only to have it, ripped away, the goal that you want to achieve ripped away from you. So after my hockey career and realizing all the trials and tribulations that I went through, I wanted to make a program, right, that gives back to kids that look like me, right? Because growing up, God knows where I would have been if I had a mentor like my co-founder, Dampy Brar, who won the Willie O'Ree Community Hero Award from the National Hockey League. I wish I had a guy like Damps. He's one of the first pro South Asian hockey players in our community, right? And having a guy that was playing pro hockey at the time, even if it was just a couple words of encouragement when I was a kid, it would have made a world of a difference. So the whole basis of Upna Hockey is to give back, is to provide that mentorship, and just to let our community know what kind of players are really out there. And it's crazy, Ryan, I know you know, but there's girls in our community playing university level hockey, earning scholarship. And that is a big advancement for our community. Now, how do you adapt? You could always put kids in hockey, and we were fortunate enough to get a bunch of hockey equipment from Bauer for the holidays. You can give the hockey equipment out, and the kids can go play hockey, but they're still going to face the racism that I felt, that you felt, that we all feel. And it's all about bridging that gap with Upna Hockey. How do we provide that support and mentorship and allow these players that look like us be role models for the next generation? And that's where you see our platform really thrive in introducing new players all across Canada, in the United States. And I know we've been talking a lot about just the immense talent from the South Asian community and how, there's enough talent to kickstart India's national Olympic team at this point. I know there's a lot of stuff going back home right now for Ryan. Obviously, I wanted to show support for our farmers back home protesting. And this is where these community relationships need to be formed from hockey and understanding what communities go through, whether it be here in North America or even back home, in India and in our community. We're going through a lot. We're protesting and we're fighting for our rights. And it's for us to make sure that they're good as well, right? And I really wanted to just make sure that the message that came across from our side is that we love hockey. I know I grew up a fan. I went to the rink 6 o'clock in the morning, but you know what, Ryan, when you're playing Bantam AAA and you wake up for school at 7 o'clock in the morning and you dread going to the rink because you don't want to see your coach, you don't want to see the parents that are on your own team, that's a red flag, and that's what we're trying to create change in.
It's amazing to see the parallels between, after hearing both you and Devin talk, the parallels and how much the similarities of kind of what you both went through, and then now what you're doing to give back and try to improve the situation. I want to also let you talk about this too. I want to give everybody a chance to answer this question. What do you reflect upon, or based on your experience, did you witness racism? What's been your experience as a player and now someone who's in kind of a management position?
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting. First, I think probably good to recognize that you do have two goalies on the call right now. So that's right there is pretty rare in the world, but I was happy when I saw Devin's bio being a goalie as well. I didn't think about it when I was thinking about my answer to this question, but I started in ringette when I was 6 years old because I actually wasn't allowed to play hockey. So this was back in the 80s, and not racism, but sexism, that girls weren't allowed to play hockey when I was at the rink and my dad was trying to sign me up with my brother. So that's how I started in ringette. But another sport that I have played, I've been the goalie for the national team for inline hockey for Team Canada for about 10 years. And now I'm an assistant coach there. And inline hockey is quite fascinating that we play all over the world. All the different continents all have national teams. One example that I have is actually a positive example, but Iran submitted a women's team one year at World Championships. And with the national anthems, it's a given that you stand on your blue line, you take your helmet off for the national anthem. And that was something that the women's team brought to the committee as something to discuss, was that if they're wearing their hijab, that they need to wear that, or under their helmet, if they had to take their helmet off, they had to have a hijab on, which when they're going to play, that makes it very hot. And so in order to not play with a hijab, they had to leave their helmets on during the national anthem. And so that was explained and the reasons given, and then it was explained to all the other teams so that nobody really questioned when national anthem came, whatever the various Iranian women, what their choices were on the blue line. It was just something that was understood. But I guess when I came here, I came out to Edmonton, played on the Edmonton Chimos, which is in the National Women's Hockey League. So I played both ringette and hockey at the same time. And maybe women's sports because we've had a lot of LGBTQ variety as well. But I do remember one issue for sure, which had a racial incident, that a player on our team, very passionate, fiery player, a good forward, and she came in at the end of a period and she was just irate at something that someone on the other team said. And this with her was kind of a common occurrence because the more you could get her fired up, the more penalties she would take. But this time, the thing that she was taking issue with, it was actually a racial slur. She was biracial, and somebody on the other team used a racial slur against her. And our coach came in just to find out what was getting her upset this time and realized what that person said. And he went right away to the other coach, and he talked to the coach. The other player got called out and explained what she said and why that was inappropriate. She came over. She apologized right away before we went back on the ice. And me, again, being a goalie, being in my own world, not quite sure what's going on anyways, but it was a really good learning experience that's something that's totally inappropriate. Our coach was white, but he took that somebody said something against one of our players that was inappropriate, and a great learning experience for everybody. And I think a few years later, we had a teammate that used an LGBTQ slur against somebody on the other team. And us being older and more experienced, we talked with her in between periods and just explained why that's not appropriate as well. And she didn't do that again. So yeah, we learn as we go and we kind of improve as a group too.
Fascinating to hear your experiences, Keely. I want to go back, Devin and Lodley, to the personal experiences you talked about. Devin, I want to ask you, when opposing players, like you mentioned, came up and said those racist comments to you, did you report it? And if you did, what came of it? If you didn't, why not?
let's see. So when that happened, it created a big line brawl, and the other guy got kicked out, and then he ended up, there was a time I remember when we were in the dressing room, and our coach was really mad because I think we got like a 5-on-3 penalty kill coming up, and we lost the game because of that 5-on-3, and he was wondering like what was going on, and I was too. I think, like I said, it was the first time I ever dealt with that. I didn't know, and that was the first time I never played Bantam AAA. I always played in Wetaskiwin, getting cut, being the last cut, and then the midget first, second, always got played in the local with my friends. So that last year, my third year midget, which is a make and break time, and I finally cracked the team, and there's that pressure, like if you're the whistleblower too. But I think just to personally, when that happened, I was too, taken back. I didn't know what to do. This was about 10 years ago, and I didn't know what the avenues to take. I didn't know the support there was. I didn't know really much. I was just more focused on what am I going to do to overcome this. And, at the time I just, didn't know who to reach out to, and I didn't report it. And looking back at it, maybe I should have, but I also didn't understand what was happening. So I think that's the reason.
And hopefully we're coming to a place where we have those, those practices in place where we, people and kids know what to do and know that they have a safe place where they can go report and talk to it. That's obviously something that the sport really needs, and hopefully we're coming closer to being able to have that implemented. Ladli, tell me about the experiences you shared with us when you experienced racism. Did you report it? Did you talk to your coach? You mentioned some of it was from coaches. Were you in a place to talk to anybody about it?
That was the worst part, Ryan. Like, I wasn't in a situation where I could talk about it, or even it was just me and my dad, going through hockey. And my dad's an immigrant from India who came over in the early 80s. And he fell in love with the game, right? Being here in Edmonton, saw Wayne Gretzky and Messier. And when I was born, I was very fortunate to play hockey, and that's the reason why I'm on the ice. And I think I told Gretzky this when I met him. I was like, "You're the reason why I'm playing, why I played hockey." But once I got into hockey, I realized I was different, right? I was treated very differently. I grew up a AAA player, playing with some of the best 1992 age group players here in Alberta, and I always felt no matter how hard I worked or how much effort I put in, I wasn't going to be able to play at the level that I wanted. And the first taste was Bantam AAA tryouts. And I remember the first year I came in, I was one of the last cuts for Bantam AAA, and I ended up getting cut for a kid who had torn his ACL, and everyone knew he was going to quit the team. He quit the team 2 weeks later. I got one call up for AAA that year in my first year. And then the second year, I have a coach, the very same coach, at the very last cut for the second year for Bantam AAA. He tells me on our exit our last meeting before he finalized the team, "Lally, you were very lucky to be making this team." And that hit me in a way that I didn't even know how to feel. And that whole year, Bantam AAA, second year, and that's a year you're supposed to get drafted, to the WHL. There's a lot of opportunity that year. That was one of the worst years I've ever had. Sat on the bench. I didn't have an outlet, right? I didn't have anyone to talk to, right? As much as I wanted to talk to Dad, he didn't understand the mental battles that I was going through on a daily basis. And that's when you need to have those role models and mentorship. Guys like Dampy Brar, guys like George Arcara, guys like Robin Bawa, that are there to help you along the way, and role models that support you. It just got lonely, very lonely. And there's going to be, I think, an article from The Athletic coming out this December or this month. And I go into deep about what exactly happened and just the isolation and the feeling of being alone. It really hurts. Again, it's like you're dreading to go there. It's like sometimes, on a Monday, you don't want to go into work. I felt like that throughout my hockey career. And what started off as such a pure form of love for the game ended up being so sour by the end of it, where I never even wanted to look back at it. And it took some time, right? I went through university, came up with Upno hockey and what it truly meant, not for me, not for dance, but what it meant for community and the kids coming up, right? And that's why we started this initiative. And that's where I think it needs to trend towards. And we've been fortunate in 3 short years to have be a part of these discussions. And where we find that, the game needs to go in this direction. I mean, we're seeing it in revenue too, right? The game is not in a good spot. There's a lot of owners that are taking big chunks out of player salary, whether it be payment deferrals or even escrow, where the game is not generating enough money. And I think that honestly tells a big tale of the lack of diversification and globalization of hockey. It needs to globalize to be more, to get to the level that the NBA, the NFL has become, right? It needs to grow in that direction because the numbers don't lie. After this pandemic, I know the vaccines are coming out, but it's definitely taken a toll on hockey. But it all points at one thing, and it points at the need for hockey to diversify, grow the game, and allow their minority players to be those role models for the communities that they represent.
Keely, we're seeing some comments in the chat come up about how racism in hockey exists today. There's a woman who spoke in the chat here, has typed out a message about her 12-year-old daughter being called the N-word on the ice. And this is something that happened recently, that it's a problem that still exists. And, what comes to mind after reading that is there are still some people within the hockey world who are trying to, or maybe who have this perspective that it's not that big of a deal, and that there's a sentiment that everybody goes through challenges and obstacles, and it's part of the game. Do you think that there is some denial within the hockey world still that this problem exists? Is that a lack of knowledge? What's your perspective on that?
I don't know if per se it's a lack of knowledge or just I think it's also the more people hear about these stories and the more people talk about it and the more it's in the news and the media, that kind of lends a reality to everything. And Lolly brought up COVID, but it's very similar to in the spring. COVID was, something that happened way in the distance to other people. But now in Edmonton, COVID is very, very focused on people that we know and people that are close to us. So I can't quite read the chat because I'm not wearing my reading glasses in front of everybody. But
that's a great analogy, though.
Yeah, it's that the more we hear about it and the more we talk about it and the more we have leaders. So mentioned Jujhar Khaira, and we have like Ethan Bear on our team with the Oilers as well. But same with women in sport. We're getting more women that are player development coaches and things like that in the NHL. So yeah, it's definitely not perfect and it's definitely not where it needs to go, but I think it's opening up that people are talking about these conversations. My daughter, she's 6 years old. We had a Zoom call with the coaches because we can't play in person right now. So we had a Zoom call with the coaches and parents and girls, and we were talking about Christmas. And then as part of that conversation, it's who celebrates things other than Christmas. Let's talk about that. Let's teach everybody else what we celebrate and what traditions we have, because topics like this are now common. And I think now people get more confidence that when they hear something like that, when they hear something that's happened to someone or when it happens to themselves, they know that it's not just something that you're supposed to just let go or not identify. It's something where you're supposed to stand up and say, hey, you can't do that. You can't say that. Let's talk about it. Let's educate and let's not do this.
Devin, when you were playing, from your observations, do you think that there is more racism in certain levels of hockey? You mentioned midget earlier. That's why I wanted to address this one with you.
Yeah, me and Lolly, it's the same kind of time period, right? Bantam midget is when it becomes very competitive. But I think before that, it's, behind the scenes, we're not, it's not directly at us. Maybe in the stands with our parents notice it. For example, there's 2 points I want to make here. The most innocent kind of where you see the joy the most for me is, when you go to the reserve at drop-in shinny or drop-in skates, and there's just a bunch of, Indigenous kids skating, because after school, that's, what you do is there's free ice, you go and skate and work on your moves. So just seeing that love for the game. And, you know, it's ironic, like as an outsider, I've already dealt with my career. So seeing that, it's kind of, you know, has that ironic feeling where you can see a glimpse of what hockey's supposed to be, just pure passion and joy. And then they haven't experienced that first cut of racism. And they, you know, to me, it's like, oh, it's so nice. Everyone should be there, right? But you just know the higher they get, the more racism they're going to, you know, the game is going to change for them. And the different levels of hockey, I think it's important that, you know, when you get to midget, you start to, maybe before midget, kind of you know, it's in the room, maybe, you know, you're not the most popular kid. No one wants to hang out with you. And then the older you get, it, you know, when you get to the professional ranks, it's almost as though when hockey becomes a business and, you know, your commodities and people, you know, people keep to themselves, but you feel very isolated at that time too. And so even at little like Tykes, and my girlfriend, she was at the rink and she had her boy at his practice, and you see, you know, he has a Musquecheese jersey on, and we're out of Leduc playing, you know, and you know, it's no one's really, you know, I'm not calling out anyone, it's no one's fault, but just the subtlety, right? It's not blatant, but like a parent, you know, comes up and says, oh, there's no hockey in Musquecheese. Well, we live in Leduc, you know, we don't live in Musquecheese, so we're playing hard hockey and, you know, a minor hockey system. Or there's just little things like that where even when I went to watch just the coaches on, like, it's just, you see one coach maybe turn their back and just little things like that. But after you go through it all, it's, you know, it's not by accident. There's definitely some you know, tones in themselves that there is some subtleties there. But when it comes to like professional ranks, like, I think it doesn't necessarily become blatant either. For example, I was playing in the East Coast Hockey League, and you know, I was on the bench, and we were in southern, you know, in the states, in the southern states, and I'm sitting there, and on the jumbotron, they have in between whistles, there's a, you know, like a music video kind of thing with a character that's changed into it's just a character, but it's a character it's a native character with a big headdress on, and he's, you know, dancing in, like, just being silly, right? Dancing, like wearing traditional, you know, regalia. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, this isn't like right. Like, and then you see other people that don't really know, that don't have the interaction with the Indigenous community, right? So they don't know it's sacred that they're wearing the headdress. They don't know that it's sacred to have the feathers and the dances. And then they start, you know, going up. And that's the thing about hockey, right? And when you go to the higher levels with the logos and stuff, that just opens up possibilities for people that don't have the education to, you know, war cry, to, you know, to get up and dance with their friends while they're drinking a beer. So, and to me, just sitting there, it just made me feel like very isolated, that, you know, like there was no proper protocol for, like, there's no thought that goes into having this chief on the big jumbotron dancing like a, you know, like a fool. So.
Yeah, that's really powerful, and you know, it's one of those things that gets overlooked in the name of entertainment, and I hope we're at a point where I know that that's something that has come up in some of the NHL meetings that I've attended in terms of the in-game experience. Is something I've brought up as well. I'm glad you shared that experience with you. Lalli, there's a few interesting things coming up here in the chat. A question from Aline Tarani, who's a Hockey Alberta official, and talking about how the way the rule is set up for officials is that they need to physically hear a player use a racial slur in order to penalize it. And this is something that, you know, it's kind of hard to police on the ice in one sense, because there's a trust factor, right? If someone comes up and says to you, so-and-so said something, you know, you have to, as an official, probably analyze the situation there and figure out what to do. But the way the rule is written, the official has to hear it. What are your thoughts on that? And you know, maybe do you have a way to kind of solve that issue?
Yeah, I think you got to look a little bit deeper on this topic. And obviously, like, hearing the racial slur is one thing, and the referee reacting and making the right call but maybe understanding why that kid actually said that racial slur, right? So you're seeing a lot of, I mean, I went through it in hockey. Referees heard it. They never did anything about it. I know nowadays, if the referee does hear it, there will be penalties. So we are moving in a good direction. But then again, I think the bar has to be set by basically the highest level of hockey, right? What is our tolerance for racism, for racial slurs, right? There was an incident with Brandon Manning, the Edmonton Oilers affiliate, and there was a racial slur that he had targeted, I think, against Bakoji Amama, and during a game. And how do these leagues appropriately deal with racial slurs? I mean, I know that if I'm working in a workplace, or if anybody's at any job, for all of us, for society, if I call someone a racial slur, I'm pretty sure I will be the first one getting fired and out the door, because that's the right step to take. I mean, we saw it with Bill Peters and Akeem Aliu. There was zero tolerance on the Calgary Flame part. That was unacceptable comments 10 years ago. It's unacceptable comments anytime, right? You just can't be saying those words. And you terminate the contract and you let the coach find another opportunity. Where I see where hockey with racial slurs, if you want to make a point and you want kids to learn the right thing, I mean, I'm just taking an example for Brandon Manning. I believe 4 or 5 game suspension was just a tap on the wrist saying, okay, please don't say that ever again. But where's the racialized training, the insensitivity training, right? Maybe someone needs to speak to Brandon about this, right? And the appropriate thing for, you know, the appropriate discipline has to be there too. Just like how the ref is going to penalize the player. But where are these players getting these thoughts of, you know, racially discriminating people? Obviously, there's a big surroundings, obviously a big thing. So the way that they're brought up, the rhetoric at home, but making sure that there's examples that are in the spotlight, like Brandon Manning, like lots of other stuff, like the Akeem Aliu situation, where these players are disciplined appropriately. That's what's going to cause the number of racial slurs to go down, and also allow these players to understand that this type of behavior is completely unacceptable.
Yeah, it's a good way to look at it from a broad perspective. I think a lot of people are appreciating that perspective you're providing, Ladley. And Keely, moving to you from an organizational standpoint, the Oilers Entertainment Group, the city of Edmonton was a hub city for the return to play in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and you know we saw messaging inside Rogers Arena in terms of, you know, end racism and Black Lives Matter. How do you as a team manage the potential negativity that you might get from a certain part of the fan base who doesn't want to see that as a part of hockey? I mean, I get this. I'm sure Devin, Ladley, and a lot of people who are participating today and other speakers, when you talk about these topics together, racism and hockey, I get this response too that, you know, I'm not watching hockey to, you know, to hear about racism or discrimination. Why are you marrying politics together? And we're here on the UN Human Rights Day today, and for me, my response has been, this is the basic human right of respect, and so we're talking about that because it transcends in our sport. But how do you manage when, you know, if the Oilers are taking now a strong stance against racism? What is your organization's perspective on managing the potential negativity from a certain part of the fan base that we know is there?
Well, I think what we're aware of is with the NHL and being the Oilers in Edmonton is that we're very much in the public eye with everything we do. And we face that with a lot of decisions we make, but we also realize there's a responsibility of being a leader in the community. And we do that with things with our community foundation, the things that they support and the things that they help start and keep running. And I think by being a leader, you're definitely going to get people that voice their opinion that's different than what you are thinking or what you as an organization are thinking. But what we've realized, we're very fortunate to be one of the hub cities for the NHL, and that was great. But it was at a time where something like that needed to be said. And for the players, for the owners, for everybody involved at the front office too. And our front office has a variety of people with cultures and different backgrounds and everything. And it's important for everybody that works with us, and it's important for everybody that we represent, that we be role models in areas like that, and not let negative comments dissuade us from what needs to be said so that other people can realize what's going on.
Well, that's all the time we have for this session, but I really want to thank you, Devin, Lally, and Keely, for talking about your experiences. It's very powerful and impactful, and the community experiences of racial discrimination in hockey, that's what we heard from. Thank you to all three of you, and thank you to all of our participants. Again, any other questions or comments, we'll try to get those answers to you at a later time. We're going to continue on in our second period after this session. We're going to be hearing from Dr. Courtney Cito in the next keynote speech. So thanks everyone for participating in this session, and we'll see you in the next room. Thanks, Devin, Lally, and Keely.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.